we're going to give folks a minute or so to roll in. But today's conversation, we're going to focus on why your brand and website are so important for mission-driven organizations, and thinking about how that's often the first impression someone is getting from your organization is, in today's digital first world, going online and checking out your website. So I'm glad that I'm joined by two experts here that are going to help us learn some key takeaways, and they're going to talk about what a quality website and consistent branding, why those two elements are so essential. We're going to share some tips on how to improve your organization's online presence and how that improvement will then amplify your impact. So thanks for joining us today. It's going to be more of a discussion, and so please join us in the comments, and we'll look at those throughout the session and be able to chime in and answer your questions. So I think we can get started. I'm Emily Yamazales. I'm with Purpose Possible as a consultant, both in fundraising and communications. So I work a lot with clients on grant writing, development retainers, doing fundraisers, year-end giving. I also have experience helping with some website design and layout, and doing other communications such as email marketing and social. I'm also a practicing artist, so it's also very important that my online presence, my website, is very well up to date, and that I'm able to have those things available for people to find me. So that's a bit about my background within this, and I'm going to pass it over to Misha to introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Misha Vinacore. I'm the founder of Digital Confection. We're a digital studio that helps businesses and organizations with the creation of custom high quality websites. I've been developing websites for well over 15 plus years, so happy to be here to help educate people about all things related to the web. So thank you.
Thanks. And Sarah?
Yeah, of course. Hey, everybody. My name is Sarah Lawrence. I am a designer and design strategist. Sometimes I forget what to call myself because I feel like it changes all the time. But here in Atlanta, I do a lot of brand design work from the ground up, rebrands, refreshes, and how those translate into web builds and web design, and a lot of other things in between, but mostly for the purposes of today, those things.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so just to reiterate, we're going to keep this very discussion-based, so please join us in the comments if you have any questions. We'll pause and answer those. But for our first question here, we're just going to start really broad and talk about what is the overall purpose of a brand and website for an organization. So this is a big, heavy hitter question. Whoever wants to dive in on this first. Go ahead.
Sure. I mean, really, it comes down to, when we talk about the purpose of and the brand for a website, for an organization, really comes down to the one question I always ask clients is, if your website was a person, or an employee, what would you like that person to do for you? I think it's a really fundamental question that really then helps, address a lot of the key things that relate to, why you need a website, right? At the end of the day, it is a tool to help your business or organization move forward. So asking that first question, I think, is fundamental to, the rest of, all the other questions one may ask.
And I can add to that a little bit. I mean, I feel like one of the easiest answer for me would just be like, it depends on your organization. It depends on what it needs to do. Does it need to solicit volunteers for different things? Do you want to speak to individual donors, corporate donors? Do you want people to attend an event? It kind of depends on each organization's specific mission. But a lot of those broad goals kind of come down to demonstrating credibility, answering questions, like maybe somebody does want to give you money and then you got to tell them how to do it, and then offer next steps for engaging with you and your mission at whatever touch point makes sense.
And both of you, I'm sure, have seen when websites get overlooked. So sometimes, nonprofits get caught up in day-to-day being on the ground delivering service, and their website just over time gets out of date. So why do you think that being in this digital first world, having that first impression, how does that get overlooked? Or why is that not so much a priority for a lot of people that, you're working with?
Yeah, I think it's an attention thing. I mean, I think now like there's a lot of digital platforms, right? You got hundreds of social media accounts, you got different metrics that, engagement, your audience is splintered everywhere. So it's easy, right? Depending on your sector and what talent you have, now you have to do TikTok videos, now you have to do Instagram videos or these posts or on LinkedIn. I think it's a lot, right? And so yeah, like the web is sort of, I always joke, the web is sort of that old cool cousin that's like, it's been around, but like it's not the newest thing. But yeah, time and again, websites, and I think we're starting to see that today, websites are sort of, like email, like no one's replaced email yet, right? Everyone's been saying like, we're going to try to replace email, or, you don't need a website now, you got social media. But, at the end of the day, it's one of those overlooked assets that have proven to actually work over time, right? And so I think it's just a matter of, everyone trying to get onto the latest fad, trying to get your audiences. So I think it's reasonable for people to overlook those things. But I think maybe now, as we see, with the digital landscape, hopefully people start realizing that, there's very few digital platforms that you own, and your website is one of them, versus on social media, you're renting those audiences. You're at the mercy of, large algorithms and AI. So hopefully, people start realizing, hey, let's take a look back at our website and, make sure that at least, the LinkedIn banner or your social media banner, matches the design of your website, keeping that all relevant. So.
Yeah, I mean, it all acts as a hub, like you have all your social media, all your newsletters and your YouTube, and your website is continuing to be that hub for all of those different things. When I went to Mexico City a couple years ago, and a lot of the restaurants we went to only had an Instagram and no website, and I was like, wow, that is so cool and modern. But I mean, for a lot of restaurants, and for a lot of places where you only have that one singular touch point, and the information that people need is usually like hours and menu and maybe a little bit more information, that should be fine. And you're not trying to manage a lot of different streams of information and different calls to action and all these different things. But your website just continues, again, like you're not renting the audience. It's a really great point. This is a good place to have every single thing that somebody might need to know in one place, organized in a way that makes it really easy for them to navigate.
Yeah, and I mean, even going with the, with the restaurant, with their website, yeah, it doesn't have to have like 100 pages, but you're absolutely right. It should at least have the link to all your digital places, because, someone's going to search on Google Maps or there, and, maybe where you are, maybe a social media application, if you're traveling, isn't accessible, right? So like, how do you go? So giving those options to people, and goes back to, website, even at its basic, should just be your digital repository of, your online digital presence.
Yeah, talking about tying social platforms and your website together, everyone has sort of the link in bio, the different formats that are directing people, the audience on social, back towards ultimately the website where they can interact more and make those donations. So taking that journey from social and then to a website, what are some signs that y'all see it often where an organization needs that website redesign? Sarah, you're kind of smiling. Are there some big things that you've seen, taking that journey yourself, maybe from social towards the website?
Yeah, I don't know. And I think about, like, I don't know, I was smiling for a couple of reasons. This is a great topic. I feel like we have so much to say, because I'm just like, oh, I have a feeling about that. I have a feeling about that. I have a feeling about that. A lot of these different things to keep up with and to keep managing, like the link in bio. That is an example of something that's really easy to get outdated really quickly. Like you go to someone's link in bio and there's like 32 links and 28 of them are things in the past or things that are no longer active or old campaigns and stuff like that. And so sometimes I will just do like the link in bio format just on a website. Like that way they go to the website, they're able to see links, and then they get to stay within the website and explore all that content. But also you get a lot of that consistency and design control doing it that way, because using these different third-party platforms, everything is going to look within their structure. You have you can add your logo and you can add some colors, but it's still going to look like the third-party thing. So just making sure that when someone clicks on a link to your site from anywhere on the whole internet, they see what they are expecting to see, and they're not like, wait, hang on, am I in the right place? Like, did I click on the wrong link? Is this expired? Is this old? Just making sure that people are, there's no confusion about where they are and what they're supposed to be doing there.
Yeah, I would. I would add one of the things is what I call the irk factor. Like you see it, right? Like you go to the website and you're like, oh, there's something off here, right? Or like whenever you talk to a client or someone and you ask like, do you have a website? And they say, yeah, we do, but there's something about it, right? So I always say that if you find yourself creating an excuse for your website, or there's that irk factor, then you're probably already you should already start thinking about like, why do you have that irk factor? Like, what about it? Is it because your color scheme's out of date? It is a content stale, those types of things. So I would say anytime you're like, yeah, we have a website, but, or like that irk factor, or even from clicking that link, what Sarah said, if something doesn't work or something doesn't feel right, like, then I think that's your indicator.
Yeah. From personal experience with fundraising clients, sometimes when we update a CRM or we get a new donation platform, it can almost, scare people away when they're taken off the website to then the secure giving link. If it's not branded consistently, people don't want to give to something, that doesn't look like, oh, well, that must be the organization I'm giving to. So keeping those kind of things consistent too, when you're redirecting people to something outside of your website, often having that donation platform embedded into that web page helps a lot, and people aren't, worried about, oh, wait, am I giving to the right link? Is this correct? So I've seen that happen frequently, and I think that's a good thing to kind of keep in mind as well. Yeah, if an organization is thinking about a redesign or refreshing their website, what are some of those factors that they might look at first? Like, what are those things that stick out to y'all?
For me, as a external reviewer, like if somebody is like, hey, we want to, because I'll get like a contact form request or not a lot of information, and someone will say like, hey, I think we need a new website, and I'll look at it. One of the first things I check, just as a person with no internal access to the site, is it mobile friendly? Because and just for our friends in the audience, mobile friendly does it look good on a cell phone? Can I read it on a cell phone? Does it load right? Are the pictures in the right way? Is the text, I feel like a lot of smaller government websites do this, where they just take the entire page and they just make it this big, so all the fonts are like 1 point and they're hard to read. Responsive design has been a practice and has been the standard for, I think, a decade or more. And so if that's something that hasn't been considered from this year, from this era that we currently live, either that tells me the website is over 10 years old, or it was done in a way that is going to have other issues down the road. It's going to have accessibility issues. It's going to probably have some like internal structural issues. So the first thing I check is like, how does it look on my phone? And then I will kind of cascade down from there. Misha, I don't know what you would say, what the signs
I
are.
mean, yeah, I mean, you've mentioned them all, right? Design, there's that element of like, has it been updated in a decade, right? You can sort of tell like what current designs are. But I think fundamentally the biggest question is, and I think goes back to what I mentioned before, is what is the purpose it's serving, right? Like, organizations change, businesses evolve, missions evolve. Your website needs to do the same. So yes, it's possible that your organization 10 years ago, your website was working well, but today, if you're trying to solicit or find a new, donation pool, or, trying to get a new audience, that's the question you should ask, right? Is your website serving that need? And I think even more today, the currency is attention, right? We have so many, we're so easily distracted. So even simplifying your website to look, if someone's got 3 seconds to be on our website, like a resume, what do we want them to know? What do we want them to act on? And how can we how can we keep them on for, another second, or, possibly up to, 30 seconds, right? So I think that's really, the question to look at, in addition to everything about, yes, accessibility, mobile friendliness, even low latency, right? If you're a mission-based nonprofit and you have people in the field, and they're in areas where internet isn't as fast, well, then you need to work on speed, getting that critical information out there. So I think it's hard to say there's a broad answer for everything, but I think specific to the organization is it working for you? And if not, let's figure out, what can we do to fix it?
Yeah. And like design, how the website looks as from like an aesthetic design perspective is of course important. But to me, that's less of an issue than those other questions of how does it work? How can I use it? Does it, I've a handful of websites that come to mind immediately that are like very ugly, but they work well. They're mobile friendly. I can get what I need to do done without a lot of extra steps or errors or issues. And so, I think aesthetics would be a value add, but it just needs to work first. If it doesn't work, then we need to rethink it or refresh it.
Right.
So as with these elements, we've kind of been touching on user experience. And so why that matters, being able to reach people, being able to reach them quickly and effectively on mobile, meeting them where they are. And a lot of people are coming on mobile to your website. What are some mistakes that you've seen that could kind of hurt the credibility of a nonprofit from that website impression? Some things that you maybe seen that might turn a volunteer away or a donor away, kind of thinking about the things that would set people, I'll not take that action right now. Misha?
I think, especially with mobile websites, I see this a lot, is it's sometimes an afterthought versus, really making it work. I've been on a lot of websites even recently that, yeah, it's mobile, but it's slow, right? And they're not factoring, that speed accessibility component, and, you really only have 3 seconds, right? So you maybe don't want that large Jumbotron image because you have that element. And so I think that's really the critical part. But I also think, from a technical standpoint, not to get too deep into it, but making sure you're not using a lot of JavaScript or your website doesn't break because of content blockers, right? A lot of people now have blockers, a lot of web browsers, are blocking elements. And so I think we've all been on a website that it's slow to load because, well, it wasn't built with that in mind. So especially knowing who your audience is, you need to make sure that, I always say, get a website and, load up as many content blockers and try to make sure that your website works with all those blockers on, because if your font doesn't load, right, because someone has they've disabled web fonts, well, now your beautiful looking website now has like Times New Roman and looks out of place. So now the average user may not understand why, and if that's a possible donor, depending on their demographics or whatever, they may be like, oh, okay, well, this website doesn't work, maybe they're not really following. So I think going back to that is being very critical about, your website in the field and how it's loading on and testing it. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah. And people also just, if they are new to your organization or new to your website, their patience threshold is going to be a lot lower. this is like sort of a funny anecdote, but my mom went through a phase where she was super into vintage Florida postcards. She's from Florida, for context, and a couple years ago she found a couple of postcard sets on I think just like a small museum website in Florida, and she really wanted to buy these postcards because they were beautiful, but she kept having like add to cart errors, like the shipping was confusing. She just had a really hard time, and she's not that patient to begin with, and so she gave up and I think ordered some random pack off of Amazon. So that organization that she really wanted to support, she really wanted to buy the cards from them, she just kept getting tripped up and ultimately did not make the sale and did not come back. So you want to make sure that people who are waiting in line to go do something, their attention span is limited, their time is limited. You want to make sure that you give them a really clear pathway to succeed at the thing that they're coming to your site to do, whether that's make a donation or sign up or buy something.
I think also, touching on the point of ensuring that your website or particularly your website is being tested by your audience that you're serving, right? If your organization serves, a rather older demographic, well, then maybe having your, college intern to be the tester may not be the best person, right? So finding people in the group that you're serving to test it and get that feedback, that I think is fundamental to know if it's working.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of while you're still in the phase of testing things, going through a website redesign, passing it off to board members, having them test it, see if they can make a donation successfully, see if they can get quickly to volunteer information or event information and sign up. And so having people, both volunteers and board members that you trust, kind of be on the testing side, I think is a really great idea, just to make sure that your future audience is going to have the same ease and see what's getting hung up.
Yeah, and just one element to that is I always like to tell people, before you launch a website, I always say create a soft launch date, like for internal stakeholders, and send that out, right? And have them test it. And, especially if you do have a big milestone event, then set that soft launch, a month before, do it like a beta site, to get that live feedback, because I think the earlier you test is, that's the best way to, get rid of assumptions. So that is one of the best things any organization can do, is getting it in front of stakeholders as soon as possible.
Yeah, so for organizations that have, a tighter bandwidth, a handful of employees, what is the case that you would make for treating their brand and website investments as part of their mission-aligned work, rather than thinking about it as this overhead thing that they just don't have the capacity for at this time? Sarah, or Misha, go ahead.
Misha, go.
Sorry. Well, so one thing I always like to say, I wrote a blog post about this, but I've been around many projects where people just think a website is an IT thing, like, oh, hey, that's an IT thing. And the question I was asked is, well, yeah, maybe it is, but who's actually using it, right? If you think about your website, marketing or your business development team, well, they'll be using your website to, post resources to potential donors, right? Oh, so it's that division, or your outreach team is using it to solicit emails, right? So I think in making sure that if you think about your website as a tool for your organization, and getting those stakeholders to use it, right? I've been in cases where IT can take forever to get something done, but hey, if a request from the business development team comes in, well, that's a priority, right? That gets done, and so that gets fixed. So I think incorporating aspects of your digital ecosystem into your business line is the way to make sure that it stays relevant and that it is being used.
Yeah, I'm thinking about sort of those of us that are working with more limited resources, that don't have IT teams in place, kind of making it almost a part of like a strategic plan, like as we're going along and reinforcing our mission, thinking about finding funding, like for website redesign, and making that case as this is part of our, mission aligned work. This is part of our strategic plan, is to have this better online presence, because so much of it is driving the donations and the volunteers to your organization that are strengthening it at the same time. Thinking through it like that, finding specific funding opportunities for a website is definitely doable. And kind of working with limited resources, there's still a way to make those small updates to your website, and kind of having outside eyes, like maybe have a board member or a volunteer take a look at it, give some feedback, make some small changes in the meantime, if that larger overhaul isn't possible.
I think it's, also, especially with limited resources, the thing to think about is making it part of your flow. So even something as simple as, look, if you don't have the resources to constantly, put up blog posts, well, then maybe you shouldn't have a necessary dedicated section on your website for blog posts, right? And maybe, the occasional few links, you put them on your about page. I think that's the type of thing to think about. But also, I always mention that, a website isn't a one and done thing. It's a phased approach. There's always going to be a version 2. I've never, ever worked on a website project that stopped, right? There's always something people want to do. And so I think embracing that, and then focusing on, your budget, especially, with limited budgets, it's focusing on how much can you spend right now and how much can you commit to monthly, and then using that as your barometer of like, okay, well, for the first, we only have this amount of money. Well, we just need to update this section of the website. And truth be told, users don't really remember like what a website looked like a few weeks before, even months ago. So that that phased approach, I think, is important, and factoring that, you can start today, a little bit here, a little bit there, and then over time, next thing you know, you do have a website with lots of resources, and looks like a full fleshed out website. So I think that's important.
So to talk about some key takeaways, what makes a high quality professional website in your opinion, Sarah?
Yes, I would like to answer that. I think I also have thoughts about limited resources and digital presence. But I think, honestly, I think these are kind of the same answer for both. Like, how do we maintain high quality professional websites with ever limited budgets and things like that? I think my tip for listeners, for everybody listening, is learn how to take good pictures on your phone. That is like such a key thing that I feel, or that I see all the time, because working on a web project, I'm working on a print project, social media project, and I'm like, okay, do you have pictures? And the client's like, no. And then I'm like, do you have any pictures that you've taken at events on your phone? And they're like, yes. And it's all these like weird pictures they've taken of people's backs from sitting, and there's like stuff in the way, and it's dark. Like if you have people who are at events anyway because they are working them or volunteering for them, and they can take just medium good to very good pictures just on an iPhone or other smartphone of choice, that will go such a long way, because we don't have to rely on stock, which can be expensive and generic. We have a lot of different things to choose from to be able to tell that story and show that message really clearly, of direct service, of impact. And that's just a really good skill that we should have in general. So I felt like, I keep saying iPhone, but smartphone photography is way better than it used to be. A lot of websites can get pretty far just on that. And so just having, like, you don't need to hire professional photographers for every single event. I just feel like everybody having like a base understanding of what makes a good picture will really, really go a long way and be super helpful, and make your website look more rooted to a specific place or a specific mission, and just just be great that way.
I think one of the things is also content. I look at when thinking about websites, I always think of like various elements as ingredients. So your base ingredient is your content, right? I think with well-written content, you could do a lot, right? If you don't have great photos, that's fine. We can take, pull quotes and make them visually appealing. Fundamentally, everyone's seen a website that has great photos, but not a lot of substance. For me, I think, a simple design, keep, the colors basic, but if your content is like that's where you invest in the text, invest in the quotes, invest in that messaging. And that's what people remember, right? They'll remember the content, and really everything else is just, an image. Yes, with smartphones, absolutely, we can create really good images that can complement that. But at the end of the day, the best websites, I think, are the ones that invest their time in high quality content.
Mhm. Agree.
And making it easy for the staff to update, we actually have a question in our comments from Laura asking, what is the simplest, most user-friendly platform option for an org to use to rebuild or to start their website? We have a lot of people using Wix, WordPress, Squarespace, as well as custom websites, but knowing that they have like no real dedicated staff to maintain and update them, what in y'all's experience have been your easiest platforms?
I mean, it really depends. It's a really hard question because I think it comes down to, I've seen enough websites where I've seen a WordPress website that is built really well and well documented, and I've seen a Squarespace website that is not easy to work in the way it's built. I think a lot of times, a lot of people focus on the tools and not necessarily focus on like how it was built. One of the things I always tell any organization, if you're building a website, make sure you get documentation. Make sure you know how to update content, because I'll make the argument that Squarespace is known to make easy websites, but not everyone builds the website the same way, right? Not everyone's doing it the same way. So maybe someone did something uniquely weird in Squarespace that another Squarespace designer won't know how to do. Or so I would say, really, it comes down to, with regards to the platforms, I mean, it just about all of them have all the features most organizations need. I think what really helps is just being documented and making sure your staff feel comfortable with it, right? If you think WordPress has a very clunky backend admin, well, then maybe look at Squarespace, which is easy. But regardless, it comes down to having documentation on just, how do I update content? Where do I go to upload an image? Where do I go to create another user account? I think that fundamentally is what will make or break it for any
Mhm.
website.
And then additional documentation of like, what should I ask for help doing?
Right.
Because I primarily work on Squarespace websites kind of with this concept in mind, where a lot of times when I'm called in to update or fix or do something on a WordPress site, it's because like they forgot to update a plugin, or they forgot to pay for a plugin, and turns out that plugin was super important, and it not functioning crashes everything. I usually like, with Squarespace in particular, the way that they handle billing. Every single thing it's almost like a Mac versus a PC. Like, you buy a subscription to Squarespace, it's going to come with all of the stuff, the contact forms, the analytics, all those things. You don't need all these different third-party plugins that make the website stronger. You are usually not able to do like extremely sophisticated web builds like you would be able to do on WordPress. But it's nice because as long as you make sure, your credit card is up to date in one place, the site should be good forever. You don't have to manage all these different subscriptions and widgets and updates and things. But then, and then in both cases, I mean, WordPress is more straightforward and easier for non-developers to edit than it has ever been, with a lot of these visual builders that turn the back end of WordPress into more of like a Squarespace situation. And so if you're like you, or your really small team does need to make text edits or image edits, or like add users, add really simple stuff, that's pretty straightforward on both. A really important thing to keep in mind is just at what point do I need to bring in something? Maybe it's a whole new page, a whole new change in the way that we engage with people. So just understanding what things are easy to do on your side that you want to handle, and other things that are more complicated that you really want to make sure that you can work with external designers or external partners.
I also want to say it's also one of the critical things is how users are comfortable adding content to the site. Yeah, visual builders are great. I've used them, but I've also seen organizations who are it's overwhelming, right? So sometimes they just want, I just want to be able to take text and put it in this box and click publish. And, knowing that and not afraid of breaking the design. So coming down to that, those are questions you should always ask about how would you like to update content? What is easy for you? And what technical expertise you have. And I think from those questions, you're able to figure out which platform. But at the end of the day, documentation is your key.
Stepping away from websites for a moment, what is a brand and what makes a quality brand versus a not so great brand? Sarah?
I guess that's a big question. Yeah. I feel like there's an old, this might be a Jeff Bezos quote, or there's an old quote that basically is like, your brand is what people say about you or your organization when you were not in the room. So how are they talking about it? It's not just going to be a logo. I feel like in a lot of the branding process, we want to put more pressure and more ask on a simple logo mark. And a tagline and sometimes even a name, then, those individual elements can really handle by themselves. Like you want to design something or create something that expresses the way you kind of want to be perceived through credibility, through the way that organization will make you feel. That is a lot of the heavy lifting of like an initial logo mark and color palette and typeface choices and things like that. But really your brand is going to be how people feel about you as a whole, how you show up for your community. I think one thing that I know a lot of organizations struggle with is that kind of volunteer management, like making sure that people who want to donate their time or, donate funds, how they are worked with, how they are engaged with. A lot of these things are visual from the beginning, but then the thing that makes it consistent, that makes you build a strong community, is going to be a lot of these like touch points, engagements, and those can be handled, of course, with good design and good consistency. But I think using that storytelling, using that visual guideline consistently at every touch point and at every time you might engage with somebody, either that's through your website or your social in person or wherever you're engaging with them, that consistency and just thoughtfulness is going to go a really long way.
Yeah, I think one thing I'd say is it's your customer service, right? It's how you interact with your donors, with your stakeholders. We've all had that experience we were with that one brand, and all of a sudden you had that one bad experience, and that brand is tarnished, right? So I think it's yes, there's the visual components, but really what makes a good brand from a bad brand is their interaction with you as an individual, whether you're a donor, a stakeholder. That is what makes a brand, and I think everything else is sort of is secondary to the level of service you offer.
Yeah, and the brand is very much tied in and driving the website. So with that information, how can organizations unify their brand across all these digital platforms, website, social, even email templates?
I think one of the biggest things is, depending on the size of the organization, having some kind of brand guideline of like, hey, these are the colors we use. This is how you're to use our logo. This is sort of, the fonts we use, but even how our messaging, these are the types of words we'd like to use, the types of emotion. I think, it doesn't have to be, I know a lot of agencies like to create these massive, multi-page PDF prompts that have all this, but I think at the end of the day, a single document that has some of these key things is a way to emulate it. And then with graphic assets, having a centralized place to get the logo and a finalized version of various things. But I would say a single document that sort of outlines, I think, is a starting point.
I think that you mentioned like the words we use and how we talk about the organization makes me think of really good example. There's this, I think it's like an app, it's a startup called Goose Chase, and they do you can use them to set up scavenger hunts in real spaces. So like in Atlanta, there's one going on next month, and they're using Goose Chase. I don't know what their logo looks like. I don't know what their website looks like. However, what I do know about Goose Chase is that at any point in any email correspondence, they find some way to incorporate something to do with geese. So they're like, when their customer support agents are signing off, they'll say like, I'm just a honk away. If they're because my partner's been like emailing with them to set the scavenger hunt up. And at one point she was out of the office, and her out of the office vacation reply said, I'm away from the flock right now. And for an organization that is doing something that is supposed to be fun and delightful, having the way that they send emails be fun and delightful, just to me feels very good and like, I don't know, just full from an experience. Because I expect that they will be fun to work with to create something that's fun. And sometimes I just reflect on how adorable that is, and that makes me really happy. So, and that's nothing to do with what they look like. It's all about how they engage with people.
That's a great example.
And I want to start doing that, but it wouldn't make any sense for me to do that. So.
So a lot of information we've shared so far has been super useful and helpful for organizations. But if an organization wanted to review their own website, what are some of those key things they should put on their checklist?
I feel like an organization, if you are considering whether you need to refresh your site, I feel like you should not be the one to review the website. I think the way that I would do this is I would take just someone, it doesn't need to be ideally someone who is not in the space, who does not know your organization, has no idea what you do for a living, because we all have friends like that, and have them sit down in person or on Zoom in front of the website and ask them to complete the tasks that are your top goals. I would first have them like take a 30-second look through, close the site and say, okay, what do we do? What is our mission? And then talk about that and see how clear that is, how much that makes sense, how much their answer aligns with what you were hoping that they would say. And then do a second pass where you say, okay, well, now that we've had that conversation, I want you to go to the site and make an individual contribution or sign up to volunteer, or do whatever the primary purpose of the site is, and then watch them go through it and have them do it on their phone, have them do it on the computer, really make them get tired of you really quickly. And then sort of just understand from there where their issues are, and then just you're able to see from that third party what it looks like when someone is engaging with your site. Because you can definitely review analytics, you can see where there's lots of high drop off and bounce rates, but just watching someone look at a site and just go, I have no idea what any of this means, will tell you so much about where you need to make updates or changes.
Yeah, and I think even first going to your stakeholders are the first people who to ask those questions with, and then even some of your loyal volunteers or your loyal customers, whichever that may be, they're the ones you can ask, and that goes back to tying to your brand as, hey, this brand is asking for my opinion, or your largest don't, those are the places. But going back to something I said earlier is that ick factor. I think a lot of people know when their website or when something needs to be changed. So I almost say like, ask the question why. What is it? What about your website that you think you need to change? Is it just updating content is hard? Is it that people are asking the same questions to you in person, but it's on your website? I think taking some time to think about what about your website you want to change. But yeah, absolutely, having someone to go through it is number one, especially if it serves a purpose of we use our website to solicit donations, or we're using our website to download resources, or even contacting important people with for help. So, and especially I think having some of those key questions in mind of going back to what purpose you want your website to serve, and then testing that and seeing if that, is working, right? I think that's really the start of it, and it's a process, but working there, I think is good.
Yeah. About 10 years ago, the website is still up. I doubt it's still active. A UX designer made this website called The User Is My Mom. And I think it was like for $75, any company could reach out and say, like, I want your mom to review my website. And he would complete this like UX kind of like testing with her. And so she's like this single user. He would record her as she went through the site, where she was looking, where she was clicking. And then she would provide some very like mom style feedback on your site. And I feel like that was like I don't know. I think that's like a cool thing that we should do more of.
Yeah.
We have another comment in the chat, and it's from Laura about making sure that an org's EIN and that there's a phrase indicating that they're eligible to accept DAF funding are clearly visible on a donation page. Laura, thank you. I think that's a great thing that every organization should have on their donation page, and always making sure that information is clear and upfront, as well as the give button, whether or not it's nested inside that navigation bar. I think it's also good to have the donate button live outside of that navigation so it doesn't get lost. People always are able to know where to go from the homepage if they want to make a donation, so that it happens as quickly as possible. So thank you for that. And if an organization is looking to turn to external website support for updates or redesign, what should they look for in a professional, and what should they ask that professional?
So one of the big things I always mention is, look, you're going to find someone who's always going to build a website for less and someone who's going to find for more. Really, it comes down to what is that experience and what is what I always say, it's the customer level of customer service. Are they responsive? Do you get a sense that they're listening to you, or are they just giving you a cookie cutter template? I think it's very important, especially with a lot of, I've seen a lot of organizations say, hey, we like this web agency because they did X person's website or X group's website. And so they do it, but that agency never asks, like, what makes you unique? Why are you different from them? So I think especially just having that conversation of, do you feel like that they will respond to you in a reasonable time? Do you feel like they are listening to you? Do you feel like that they're, technology now, it's so much easier to build a website. It's not so much about the tech anymore. It's about that experience and feeling comfortable. And also, always getting references and, asking that. But I think the most professional aspect is that relationship, because every website development project, it's a process, right? It's a multi-month process. And the thing you're going to remember is, the back and forth, the conversation. Do you feel like they're guiding you, or do you feel like, they're going to, go silent and then out of the blue respond, and then tell you, hey, we can't do this or why? So I think it's just getting a feel on their level of customer service is one of the most critical things to ask, and asking those questions.
Yeah. Do you feel like you can trust them? Do you feel like
Yeah.
they are, and that's so tricky. That's like such a tricky thing to advise on. But do you, in your initial conversations with them, do you feel like they are listening to you? Do you feel like they are going to just slot you in the exact same process that everybody else follows? Or do you feel like they are listening to your specific needs? I have a friend who got a new roof like 5 years ago, and she got 3 quotes. One was low, one was medium, and one was high. And, they had a limited budget. They ended up going with the lowest option. But that project had so many delays and snags and redos that she told me she ended up spending the same amount as the highest quote. And she felt like it was a terrible experience. And a lot of these processes are the same way, like, can you get a website off of Fiverr? Yes. Will it be what you need for your specific thing? maybe, but probably not. You will probably end up redoing it really quickly, and you'll probably, just like the process will feel worse and feel weird. And so somebody that you feel like like I've had discovery calls with people where they, at the end of the call, they're like, that was so good. That felt like therapy, because we got to really talk about and unpack all these different things that they want to accomplish and their hopes and their dreams. And, just being able to feel like you can talk to somebody and build trust and build a rapport with them is really, really important. I mean, in general, but especially for this thing that will represent you and your organization.
Yeah, it's kind of like going on a date, right? Like you're interviewing them. You're asking these questions because they're going to be responsible for something critical for your organization. So you should ask a lot of those questions, especially, I always mention on what is your response time? Are you one business day, 24 hour? Like when can I expect a reasonable response? If who's the person that I'm going to be working with? If they're not available, who will I be able to reach out to? All these questions. I say a lot of times if they're jumping into technical jargon, you should take a step back, because then they're not asking some of those critical questions of, what is the relationship going to look like? And I think asking as many non-technical questions, and even how do they explain technical concepts, right? Do you feel overwhelmed, or do you feel comfortable about their explanation? And I think that goes into design and other things, is how do they interact with you?
Right. And building a brand and sharing all of those things, it is a relationship, and it is being vulnerable. So are there, key questions or skills that you should look for in someone that is going to build a brand for your organization? What are those things that you should look for in a designer?
I mean, I think a lot of similar answers. Somebody that you trust, somebody that either understands or shows the ability to understand your specific industry. If you are looking for brand designers, but they specifically tend to work with like donut shops, and you are, working with a housing nonprofit, like maybe their style is very different from what you're looking for, but maybe they have the ability, because a good designer does have a fairly agnostic style. So maybe they have the ability to still create something. So it's just like, what is their style going to be like? What is their ability to kind of meet your specific industry's needs, and ask those questions to get there and do some of that research. And then, just a lot of similar processes. Like are they listening to you? Are they over explaining or under explaining concepts? Because, we work in this space all day, so we know a lot of these like really high level concepts, but it kind of goes back to that customer service aspect too. Like, are they giving you answers in a way that you understand and you feel like you can ask follow-up questions or trust them? Or are they just trying to kind of like rush you off of the call so that they can do other things? So it's just, I feel like a lot of that just do feel like you can build trust with this person. Kind of like dating, I guess.
What often comes with a brand redesign? Are you doing just logo work for clients, or are you also getting into setting those typefaces, the colors, getting even into language? Like if you're working with an organization that is focused on housing, there's a specific, type of language that they might be using that's different from organizations that are working with that are an animal shelter, working with pets. So as a brand, are you advising on that as well?
I feel like, okay, I have like so many thoughts about this question. What do you receive from a branding process is going to be different for every single project. Sometimes I have people come to me be like, we need a whole logo redo. We need to redo our logo. We need to brand refresh everything. And then we talk about it, and it's like they rebranded like 2 years ago. And really the issue is that they're just kind of tired of looking at their logo, and they feel like they want something that keeps up with some of these contemporary trends. And I feel like I tend to kind of be a little bit different from a lot of designers where I'm like, your logo is fine. You know, a lot of times the logo is not the issue. It's some of that storytelling. It's going to be that website. It's going to be the materials and the touch points. And so sometimes people reach out to redo their logo and I'm like, you actually do not need a new logo. Your logo is fine. It is good. You got to keep using it and just feel confident that it is a good choice. You know, making sure, so sometimes we might just keep that there, do additional work kind of underneath it, you know, expanding into different touch points and templated support, like making a really consistent library of graphics for social media. If your organization is very active on social, but you feel there's a lot of brand inconsistency because there hasn't been a lot of guidance before. Maybe the only thing you had before just was a logo with no brand guidelines, with no like recommendations on language and usage. So it will really depend on your specific needs and kind of what that specific outcome should look like.
Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, a brand is sort of that feeling you get, and, really working with a client and asking, what is the emotion? What is the reaction you want people to get with your logo? If someone were to see their logo, right? If you look at logos, they all provide a sense of, emotional connection. So that is fundamentally what your brand it should be, right? And as Sarah mentioned, your logo might be great. So it looks like we just need to work on some of your content, right? To explain that. But I think at the end of the day, it's any and all assets related to making sure that your brand is giving out that emotion that you want donors, volunteers to get from that.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. This has been a super helpful and insightful conversation. I hope for the organizations tuning in today that you've been able to learn some things about what you can look for in your own website, how to take that step back and do a little bit of a website audit yourself, as well as some key factors to think about when going for redesign, whether website or branding. And as always, we encourage you all to reach out to us at Purpose Possible if you need help with any of these things, as well as reach out to Sarah or Misha for their expertise as well. But thank you for joining today. We really appreciate you tuning in, and know that if you've registered, if you were able to pop in late, or if you were here the whole time, we will be sending out these resources to your email, and you should receive those shortly from us. So once again, thank you. And thank you both, Sarah and Misha, for joining today's call. We really appreciate your expertise.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Alrighty, I hope everyone has a good